Okay, today's date is Thursday, April 4th. Jeffrey Harris reporting for 411 Mania, and this is the 411 Wrestling Interviews podcast. I am speaking with the former Impact Wrestling World Champion, former Tag Team Champion, former King of the Mountain Champion. This is the one and only Eli Drake. Eli, thank you so much for talking to me today. It is a great honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
The one, the only. Thank you. I appreciate you outlining some accolades there.
Okay, so tonight is the United We Stand event for Impact Wrestling. We know that you were originally scheduled to face Tessa Blanchard in a one-on-one intergender match. You opted out of that match, and now it will be Tessa Blanchard versus Joey Ryan. But do you plan on making your presence known at tonight's event?
I would be a wizard if I could do that, because I am still in Los Angeles as we speak right now.
Okay, so you won't even be appearing at that event tonight?
I won't even be in that time zone. I'm staring at the Hollywood Hills right now. So
well, that's also a good place to be.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts since they changed it to Tessa Blanchard versus Joey Ryan, now that they will be facing each other?
Well, again, you got two great performers in their own right as far as for what they do. I've known Joey for a long time. I'm cool with Joey. I'm friends with Joey. Is it my kind of wrestling? No, but I think it has its place. If he does that on bar wrestling, I'm cool with that. I wouldn't want to do that on television when I'm trying to push serious angles. But at the same time, nothing but respect for the simple fact that he's been able to get a lot of eyes on him with what he's doing. And I think that as far as at least anyway from a physical standpoint, you look at the matchup between those two, at least a little more physically matched, I would say.
Now, we got a little bit of your thoughts on intergender wrestling, and you think it has its place, but I think there's been a bit more of a debate lately about intergender wrestling and its place in wrestling, I guess.
So much.
With this whole women's revolution going on. I mean, this Sunday, the women are going to be headlining WrestleMania for the first time ever. Why do you think... do you think that's a cause of why this is becoming a bit more of a debate in the industry right now?
I'm not sure. I think the women's revolution is a great thing because when you look at 20 years ago, as they say, the girls back then for the most part were eye candy, and now they're bringing it. And quite frankly, when you look at WWE, the girls are outperforming the guys. Becky Lynch is the biggest thing going in WWE right now. So she and Ronda and Charlotte absolutely should be main eventing the pay-per-view. At the same time, our business, again, there are other little spot shows and gag shows and whatnot where you can get away with different things. But if you're trying to present serious angles that are supposed to look like an actual fight, you lose a large section of your audience if you put Ronda Rousey against Brock Lesnar. It's not a believable look. If you put guys and girls in the same weight class, I could buy that. And everybody will go to, well, what about Rey Mysterio and the Big Show or whatever? Big fan of Rey Mysterio, big fan of the Big Show. I didn't care for that, honestly. I don't think that it's cool for the moment to see that size differential, but to see two guys go one-on-one like that, I don't think it's believable. At the same time, when you're a legend in the business in a certain sense, Rey Mysterio, you can get away with a little bit more. But at the same time, I think, again, that also turns off a casual audience because casual audience is going to look, and they might stay for a second, but they're going to look at that and just say, this screams phony wrestling BS. And everybody knows it's a work. Everybody knows it's not real. But at the same time, you have to be able to suspend your disbelief. And I've heard people say, well, what about Wonder Woman? Well, Wonder Woman has superpowers. Like, we live... As far as wrestling is concerned, the rules were set that this is based in some level of reality. As far as the combat is concerned, now people say, what about The Undertaker? What about this? All that stuff was outside of the realm of the actual combat. The actual combat in the ring was still meant to be presented with physics in mind, with Earth, with the science that exists in this Earth in mind, with biology, with all of that. So to just take that away and all of a sudden say that those rules are out the window is kind of silly. And I know a lot of people are comic book fans that are wrestling fans now. And so to put it in those terms, if all of a sudden they told you that one day now that suddenly Wolverine could fly and see through walls and whatever other superpowers they didn't have before, they'd be like, well, wait a minute. And it's the same kind of thing. It doesn't make sense to have a 5'3" female wrestler face a 6'4" male wrestler. It honestly doesn't even make sense to have a 5'3" male wrestler facing a 6'4" male wrestler, in my mind, because again, we're trying to present this as a shoot, as a legit fight. Of course, there are funny moments, all that, but it's got to grab you as real, especially if you're going to push any kind of a serious storyline or serious angle. And I don't know. I could go on for days and days and days about this, but that's my diatribe.
Well, I think it's a very pragmatic viewpoint, and I'm definitely into the idea of when you mention Wonder Woman in comic books, because I'm a big comic book guy. I think it's just a matter of, as you mentioned, suspension of disbelief and credibility. Even in a fantasy world, they establish their own set of rules.
Exactly.
Like Superman. Like Superman, it's been established he's weak to green kryptonite. Green kryptonite can kill him. Superman, another way Superman is vulnerable is to magic. So so those are the rules that are established, and I think it's the same in professional wrestling.
Yes, they're established rules from day one, and,
right.
and if I can join you in the nerd pool here for a second.
Totally.
I've always been a Star Wars fan. And I've noticed that if you watch the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy,
right.
they never mention a damn word about fuel. Never, ever, never, not ever.
Right.
And now I remember watching Solo and watching, what was it?
The Last Jedi.
Star Wars episode, what was it, 8?
Yeah.
And all they were talking about is fuel. And I'm like, wait a minute. Fuel was never a concern ever. Like, it just seems like a sudden addition to the rules where it's like, just don't change the rules on me now.
I think we knew about hyperdrive or hyperdrive engines.
But it was never like, hey, I'm running out of fuel.
Right.
I got to stop and get something or I'm going to get killed.
Well, because this is a real deep cut here. Like in Empire Strikes Back, Luke flies halfway across the galaxy from Hoth to Dagobah. You think he would need some fuel to get from there to Bespin or yeah, it was never a thing before. Yeah, it's a good point. Now, going to back to your career. I read a rumor online. I have no idea if this is true, but that's why I'm asking you. It says your contract with Impact Wrestling is going to expire on May 31st. Do you want to clarify? Is there any truth to this rumor?
That is absolutely true.
So, have you signed your next wrestling contract? Or do you know about your next wrestling contract yet?
I have signed nothing. There's no ink on any papers. I know what I'm doing. I've already made my decision. But I think I'm going to keep that one tight to the chest right now.
Okay, fair enough. So,
but nothing has been signed anywhere, whether Impact or anywhere else.
Okay, I think that's fair. Now, I know you talked to another podcast last month where you mentioned WWE and you talked about rumors of WWE being interested in you. Has that, and I think what you said was no one has formally contacted or offered you anything. Has that status changed since you mentioned that? I'm sorry.
No, it's still kind of the same thing where it's like, I've got friends in there. Look, the good fortune of my career has been, with as long as it's been and with as many different places I've bounced around, I know a lot of people now who are in that system, and that goes for coaches, producers, wrestlers, and so occasionally I'll have conversations with them. Or like, last year in New Orleans, I ran into Robbie Brookside and had a great conversation, and just talked about when I used to be there and whatnot. So things like that. Sometimes I'll reach out, or they'll reach out, or whatever, and they'll start to say like, you'd be really good here, blah, blah, blah. But again, that's not anybody making me an offer so much as just a person that I'm friendly with saying it's something to consider.
Now, I got to tell you, Eli, with your talent and your physique, when your contract is up, I would have to say you're one of the hottest signees any roster could have right now.
I appreciate
being
that.
a free agent.
I'm sure a lot of Twitter would disagree with you, but that's fine.
Well, there's a lot on Twitter I disagree with personally.
Right.
Now, I think the industry is in a good place for someone like you right now because I feel like there are options for talents such as you to make money and to pursue your career and pursue what you love. Do you think, or am I wrong? Do you think the industry is, I don't know, do you think there aren't options for guys like you right now?
Well, no, I think the options are more plentiful than they've been in probably 20 years right now at this point. At the same time, I don't think that the business is flourishing
right
as much as a lot of people have been saying. I think that it is on the indies. I think the indies are doing fantastic. But if you look at pay-per-view numbers, television numbers, WWE's both TV and house show attendances, it goes to show that there's not a huge desire from a larger audience for the product. And when it's big with a niche, that's a good thing because at least then you have an audience. But at the same time, if you want to grow it, you got to go outside of that in some way. And that's always kind of been my aim is, first of all, I want to make whatever I'm doing look as realistic as I possibly can within the confines of wrestling. Wrestling can be a little silly, a little goofy, but at the same time, you still got to be able to turn that corner. I might be able to say something goofy or funny or whatever, but at the same time, if I can turn that corner of still being intense and meaning what I say, I think that's something that draws in audiences of people. The biggest swells in wrestling, and I've said this 100 times in interviews, so stop me if I'm beating a dead horse here, but the biggest swells in wrestling were the late 80s in the Hogan era and the late 90s, early 2000s in, Rock and Austin Attitude Era. And the reason for that is because it was characters. It was hard-hitting action. It wasn't the best wrestling in the world, but the wrestling was almost secondary. Like my brothers, for instance, I like to use my brothers as a great example because they watch wrestling almost their whole life, but not regularly. Like they don't watch it that much now. But in the late 90s, they were like, man, I watch it just for the talking half the time.
My brother is the same way.
Yes. So if you have the trash talk is what sells the match. So I think a lot of that's missing in the business. I think some of the people are getting better. But that's one of the big things that's been missing for a long time. And I think that that's kind of where I shine. I mean, I do a fancy thing here or there, but for the most part, I'm not a flippy guy. I don't do, a lot of holy shit kind of moves or whatever.
I don't think you need to be a flippy guy to be a good worker, though,
No.
I think you are a good
not at all.
worker.
It all comes down to psychology,
right.
And half the time it's not about the moves so much as what's coming between the moves. What are my facials? What's my body language? How am I interacting with the audience, with the other people around ringside, all that stuff. And that's what draws people in. And some people get drawn in by the moves. That's why the cruiserweight division got so popular in WCW and whatnot. But I don't believe that that's a main event thing. And I think that 205 Live speaks to that for the simple fact that they're not doing big numbers. They have a core audience that's into that. But for the most part, people are into characters and trash talk. And then, then a match that blows off from that trash talk. But the trash talk is really so undervalued and so underrated as far as to how important it is.
Now, Impact Wrestling, formerly TNA, is really where I feel you broke out and became a name in this business. Sure. Have you been happy with Impact Wrestling of late?
I've been happy and I've been miserable at different times.
Okay.
Look, Impact has been fantastic to me. I'm one of the best paid guys there. I'm proud to say. I was very fortunate that, the first year I came in, I was kind of brought in as the third guy in the Rising. I was kind of just a body. Because the way that I even got hired there was one of the producers at WWE, who was kind of fond of my work, kind of reached out to John Gabrick and was like, hey, you guys should take a look at this guy. So kind of on that, they brought me in for a dark match, ended up liking what I was doing, liked my promo work when we did some stuff in the back, and ended up throwing me in that group. But I don't know that they expected much out of me. It seemed like they were kind of expecting a lot more from, what's he work by? Is it Tamatanga or is that his brother? Well, Micah or Camacho.
Tongaloa and Tamatanga?
Tongaloa, that's right. So anyway, eventually then I started getting a microphone, and then it was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, this guy's got something. And here's a little story that nobody is aware of, but do you remember back when James Storm went to NXT for like a minute?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I was also supposed to go to NXT then, because I'd run into a couple guys from NXT in Orlando, Florida when we were doing tapings. It was one of our last tapings in August of 2015, right around the time where we were on Destination America, and Ring of Honor, I think, had been put on that time slot like right after us or whatever. And so we started thinking like, oh my, are we about to get pushed off? Are we getting canceled? What is this? And so I ran into some of these guys from NXT, and one of them was like, what would you think about coming back? And it had now been a year since I'd been released. And I was like, well, hell yeah, I'd like to come back. And because I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to have a job. And he's like, all right, I'll bring up your name. So I got a call a couple days later, talked about everything, talked about, we could have this ready to go for you if you wanted to show up in October to one of the tapings. And I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can get my release. So I sent an email to John Gabrick back in around, I want to say September, October 2015, requesting my release. He vehemently refused. And he was just like, we really want to do a lot of stuff with you. There's a lot of potential with you. Please stay with us. And if you do, I'll rip up the contract you have now, and I'll write you a new one. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is such BS. But I was like, all right, fine. So I told them, hey, look, my deal's running up in February, so why don't we just, WWE, I told them this. I said, why don't we just hit back up then? But true to his word, he ended up writing me a nice 6-figure deal, the first 6-figure deal I'd ever seen. And so I was like very happy to stay with Impact at that point. So they've treated me very well in that sense. And I think in the idea that I was able to kind of get that out of there, as far as like, here's a guy who, again, I don't think they expected much out of me. I was able to come in, knock it out of the park, and now I'm able to get, pretty sizable raise on a new contract. It's pretty huge. And then, just considering the momentum and having my own talk show and all that kind of stuff, it was really cool. At the same time, like I said, there were definitely some down points and some things where I'm just like, man, I want to quit this business. But I think anybody who's been doing it as long as me probably has those times where they're just like, man, I got to get out of this. But there's nothing in the world I love more than wrestling. That's why I'm so passionate about it. That's why I feel like I need to defend it when, this intergender stuff comes up and whatnot. And again, it's nothing to do with, look, when I was in high school, our wrestling team was state championships. We were state champions like probably a few years in a row. And there was a girl on the team. And the girl held her own. She kicked ass. But guess what? She stayed in her weight class. She wasn't beating up dudes who were a foot taller and, 150 pounds heavier than her. So it's just, I like to keep some semblance of realism, quote unquote. I know for some reason that word offends people. But some semblance of believability.
Right.
Because I'm very passionate about this. I'm very passionate about this business. I grew up loving, wanting to be wrestling. I wanted to be in wrestling since I was a little kid, and now I'm here. And it's like I don't want to lose the art form that I fell in love with. Now, and it just kind of feels like day after day, it's just kind of distancing itself from what I fell in love with.
Now, after signing that 6-figure contract, Impact went through quite a few changes over the last few years, went through quite a few different networks. So here you sign this contract. Do you ever get worried, man, I don't even know if this contract will be worth anything in a few months. And I hope I'll still be able to continue working, doing what I love.
The funny thing is, I kind of got numb to that after a while, because I remember that first time feeling it. Because again, I had only been with the company for a few months the first time it happened. That August in 2015, when like I said, we'd done that last taping. We thought, you remember that you might not remember this, maybe you do. We did that world title series. It was kind of disjointed going into Bound for Glory 2015.
I remember.
We didn't even know necessarily what that was for. That wasn't really even necessarily supposed to be a world title series. We just filmed all the matches, and then they made it that.
Wow.
So, and because nobody really knew what was going on. So as far as we knew, that stuff was just going to air on the international, because we thought we might have been off the air at that point. Anyway, I guess we ended up staying on through the end of the year. But yeah, that's a point where we were kind of like, okay, is this done? And then we get to the following year, and it always seemed to be right around Bound for Glory. It was always just before Bound for Glory. They'd be like, the rumors are that, Impact's about to sell, or they're going to be closed, or whatever. So I bid on it one more time in 2016. And I was like, oh, no, what am I going to do? Well, at least, okay, I think I have a soft landing. I can go to WWE. They have some interest. Because basically that year before, when they made me that 6-figure offer, I basically said to WWE, look, this is what they're offering me. I don't know that because they basically WWE wanted to sign me for the same deal I had in 2013, which was, just PC and okay money, but not 6 figures. So basically I was told, take that deal, make yourself a star, and we'll talk in a year. So at this point, in 2016, I'm biting on the whole Impact's going to close, whatever, but I'm still feeling like I'm fine. I've got a soft place to land, I'm pretty sure. But then, of course, we survived and everything was fine. And then to 2017, we hear the rumors again. And at this point, I'm numb to it. It's like, all right, past 2 years, plus however many years before that, people were saying, it's over, it's dead, whatever. I was like, anybody who was freaking out, I was like, don't worry, we're fine. So, after a while, you just kind of get numb to it, I think.
Now, how do you look back at your time in the WWE developmental system in your first run in NXT? Was that an invaluable experience to you in getting you to where you are today?
I'll be honest. I think with the way that they ran it then, I hear it's different now. I think with the way they ran it then, I actually got worse.
Wow.
And that's not any kind of a dig at the coaches. The coaches were wonderful and pretty much just doing what they were ordered to do. But we pretty much just did drills all day. The 3 hours of in-ring training, we never really had matches. It was just, depending on who your coach was, it was different drills. And I can recall a few of us asking, hey, can we just do like matches on the fly? Like just pair a couple of us up and we can just have like a 3-minute, 5-minute match where we can just call everything on the fly and, nothing's thought out. It's just, let's just go and just get into the habit of working on those mechanics and having the calls and all that stuff. Well, no, people are going to get injured, whatever. And I'm like, people are getting injured doing the drills anyway. What's the difference? Like, why not get those reps in? So I feel this way. I know I've heard a lot of other people say that they felt that way. That it felt like you kind of almost lost how to do a match in a certain sense. And again, the coaches were just doing what they were told. And I had a great relationship with all the coaches there. I had a great here's the thing with me. I stay to myself, especially when I don't know people. So for the first probably 2 or 3 months, with a few exceptions, everybody in the locker room hated me. And then you give it, about month 3 or 4, everybody warmed up and they're like, oh, okay, you know what? He's not so bad. Same thing in the Impact locker room. It's just, I guess I carry myself a certain way. You see me in the ring or on the microphone or wherever, I'm this big verbose personality. And then I come to the back and I'm just like quiet into myself and people are just kind of like, well, who's this guy think he is? And really all it is I'm a quiet guy. I don't have a lot to say when I'm in the back. You turn a camera on, it's a little different. So it's funny because, at first, biggest heel in the locker room. And then at some point, there's a babyface turn in the locker room and everybody's cool. And like I said, all the coaches, I was on great terms with them. It was a good experience in the sense of the connections that I made. The only guy really that was a big wall or giant speed bump for me was Bill DeMott.
Wow.
Which, it's kind of a regular occurrence, it seems. So I don't know. I mean, other than that and him, which pretty much led to my demise, the experience was pretty good for the most part.
Now, having said that, would you ever be open to a return to NXT or possibly giving WWE another go? I mean, Bill DeMott he's no longer there in the developmental system. It's I believe it's Jason Bloom now. Would you be open to that, or would things have to be Matthew Bloom? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would things have to be different if you were to return, or would you be open to return to NXT at all, or is it for you main roster or bust?
I'm not really against anything if the deal is right.
Right.
It really comes down to the money being right, the time being right. The beauty of if I did return now is I have a lot more advocates on the inside now. Terry Taylor used to always say, you can have advocates or adversaries. And when I first went in, I didn't really have any advocates. I didn't really have any adversaries either, but I didn't have any advocates. And now, after being there and being different places where now people have, kind of graduated up to that level, I do have a lot of advocates. There's so many guys that I know who are now on the writing staff, or the production staff, or the coaching, or even all the wrestlers that I know that I'm friends with. I mean, I just had a text exchange with Braun Strowman a couple days ago about, how lean he's getting, because I've never seen him look like that before. So, I mean, I talk to these people still every now and then. We're not like best of friends, but it's like we have good communication. And for the fact that I have that, going back there, I feel like would be so much more advantageous than the first time around, and not having that giant roadblock of Bill DeMott. Now, Matt Bloom was always seemed to be very friendly to me. Always seemed to enjoy what I was doing, at least as far as my promo work. I don't know that he ever saw me work in the ring. So of course, things aren't always going to be peaches and rainbows, but I think that I think things could go very well if I went back there.
Now that I've asked that, do you have any advocates in All Elite Wrestling?
Again, I've got plenty of friends up there too. I'm very close friends with Scorpio Sky. We both live out in LA. See him a lot. We hang out a bunch. I've always known Chris Daniels. We've had some level of rapport. I mean, again, not like best friends or hanging out or anything, but I mean, I've had his number since way back TNA days. Let's see, I'm trying to think of who else is it. As far as
Kazarian, maybe? He's another SoCal guy.
A little bit, kind of more through Sky. I kind of just ended up running the first real interaction I had with Kazarian last year when they were doing their the Ring of Honor show in Vegas. I was just hanging out with those guys backstage, their Vegas taping, hanging out with SCU. And then I think I ran into Sky randomly at the airport one day. We were both flying out somewhere, and he was with Kazarian. So that was the first time I'd really, I guess, interacted. We were having drinks together, whatever. Cody and I have had conversations. I talk to him from time to time. Nothing, again, not best friends, but we have a conversational conduit, I guess you could say.
Now, from my perspective, I think AEW has been good for the business just for the simple fact that I think it's giving talent leverage. It's getting them paid, and it's giving them an option. Now, it might be temporary. We'll see how this new venture works out. I'm curious about what you think about AEW and how those people are making a go of things right now with their upcoming event.
Well, I think it's damn amazing that for never having a show, I mean, technically, I guess you could say All In was them, but not from an official standpoint. Right. Having never had a show and having this much buzz is on another level. But, the crazy thing about the wrestling business is everybody's kind of been at the mercy of WWE in a sense, to where if you're unhappy with something or whatever, as a talent, you're kind of at the behest of the office in a certain sense. Whereas, you look back at when ECW, WCW were around, guys had options. If things weren't going so great, it was like, okay, well, I'm not happy with this. I'm going to go over here. And there was more power for the talent. Whereas now there hasn't been a lot of power for the talent in the last few years. But as the options grow for places to work, that gives more power to where they don't have to just bow down to the office. And I'm not saying that I think that the wrestler should be able to just F off the talent or the office, but just in the sense that there should be more of a balance to where it's not just. Sometimes you look at the way business is done, and it just looks a little one-sided. And I think that with more options, if AEW can actually get things rolling, and obviously it's not there yet. They haven't even had their first show. They sold out a show. They sold out All In. They sold out Double or Nothing. But the thing that people have to remember is, as impressive as that is, it's a destination show. This is kind of like a WrestleMania in a sense, to where it's not like
it's not weekly TV, for one thing.
What's that?
It's not weekly TV.
Well, yeah, there's that, but also when you consider like All In selling out, that's an amazing accomplishment, and kudos to them. But it's not Chicago people who sold that out. So, like, whereas WWE goes to Chicago, Las Vegas, wherever, that's the people from that city going to that arena.
Oh, okay.
So All In was a destination show where you had people coming in from England, you had people coming in from the West Coast, the East Coast, everywhere to go to Chicago to see that show.
Well, like, I'm going to Double or Nothing, and I'm in the SoCal area, so that's in Las Vegas.
And,
so just
for example, that's barely even an issue, because what is a 4-hour drive for us?
Right. But like going from LA to Houston, or even international audience coming in.
Exactly, and what I'm saying to that is, again, an amazing feat that technically an independent show is selling out a 10,000 seat arena. Amazing, and all the credit in the world for the business prowess to get that done. At the same time, it just needs to grow to the point where now you can do that with the local audience at every little market that you go to, as WWE has been able to do in the past. And until you can do that, it's not going to really be competition. And I think that that's a smart idea on their part, to not go straight up trying to compete from the start and just being an alternative. Because I think that is how, for instance, WCW back in the day, you had NWA in the early 80s, who I think in some level could compete with the WWF until Hulkamania really took off. But then you had WCW in, MGM or Disney or whatever it was, in those small little arenas. But they couldn't really compete the same way, to where it had to stay on Saturdays and Sundays. But then finally, when they could start filling up arenas, okay, wait a minute. Let's go ahead and let's move ourselves to Mondays. Because now you have a more viable product where actually there's people all over the country watching.
What was your favorite thing about working with one of the business most interesting and historical personalities in Scott Steiner, a wrestling legend?
I want to tell you a really crazy story.
I want to hear it.
Craziest story ever. But I don't have one. Because he was completely cool and composed and super damn generous. I've heard of him flying off the handle. I've heard of him, going nuts on people. But as far as for like everything we were doing last year, it was pretty much like, hey man, what do you want to do? And he was like, I don't know, you got any ideas? And I'd be like, well, what about this? He'd be like, yeah man, that sounds pretty good. I'd be like, okay, cool. And if he had a tweak or something to it, then, he'd throw it in there. But for the most part, like he didn't big league, he didn't strong arm. He was kind of just go with the flow for the most part. And actually, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but that Frankensteiner you did off the top, I kind of made that happen.
I think that's actually a good story in itself. Yeah.
Well, see, we were calling the match with LAX for the tag titles, and he hadn't gotten there yet, so it was just me and those guys talking about everything. And he gets there, and I was like, "Hey, so you got another Frankensteiner in you?" And me expecting him to just kind of laugh it off, because I was actually presenting it as a joke. He kind of stopped for a second. He's like, yeah, I think I can do that. I'm like, oh shit, okay. So me thinking he's just gonna do one off the ground and just jump up and hit it. He's like, oh yeah, we'll do it up off the second. I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. We got a match on our hands. So that was cool. That's probably the best story I can give you, but that's a pretty damn good story.
I think it is damn good. Now, looking back at your career, are there any, besides working with Scott Steiner, are there any feuds or matches, opponents you work with that you're especially proud of the work you got to do.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of my career from, back, but Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer, used to be my manager for like 2 or 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just amazing every damn time. Because every time we got on the camera, it was just the perfect mix. 2 guys who can talk, and just the craziness that is Paul Bearer and Percy Pringle. And it just added an element to everything I was doing. Of course, I mean, if you get to my Impact career, I don't know if they stand out a lot, but I feel like every match I've had with Eddie Edwards has always been like spot on, good and intense. I guess he was the one that came down to me and him at the end of that Gauntlet for the Gold when I actually won my first world title. So, I mean, that's definitely a memorable moment for me. Having Chris Masters in my corner for, God knows how long, that was a lot of fun. I think we got really good stuff out of that. And I think we had I know we had an amazing chemistry. I think just the way that they were booking him at the time just kind of left him feeling a little unfulfilled, and I get it. It's just sad that I think we could have done a lot with that.
Any plugs for yourself or any projects you're working on you'd like to share that we can mention?
Not particularly. I just auditioned for a Dodge Charger commercial yesterday, but I don't think I'm going to get it. I don't think I did very well at it. But of course, I've got my T-shirts online, ProWrestlingTees.com/Eli Drake. I've got my YouTube channel, which is slowly crawling along at a snail's pace because I am completely inconsistent, but I'm trying to get better at it. That's youtube.com/Eli Drake, I believe. Let me double check that right now as I'm sitting in front of my computer. Nope, it's not. Don't do that. That's somebody else. Who's this guy? I'm not sure. But just look for me, Eli Drake, on YouTube. You'll find it.
I'll find your official channel and I'll put it in there.
And of course on Instagram and social media, Twitter, you can get me at the Eli Drake.
Eli, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And man, I can't wait to see where you go next and where you end up next. I'm very excited. I think you're a top talent.
I'm excited to see it myself. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Bye-bye.